What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here, and welcome to our daily show where we discuss the fourth stimulus check update, the government shutdown that is looming on the horizon in now 2 days, the government default, which is now looming in about 2 weeks, which will be the first time ever that the government could default on all its debt obligations, possible Social Security payments, payments to military, literally everything the government pays out, child tax credit payments, Medicare, Medicaid. Literally, the government could run out of money here in as little as 2 weeks if they don't raise the debt limit ceiling. We're going to be talking about that, the next upcoming stimulus package, the infrastructure package, money, investing, and pretty much everything you need to know about on this show. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below. It's completely free to do so. And if you find these videos helpful, don't forget to hit the like button for us down below. My. The vote of all votes last night failed. That's right. Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, led the Senate Republicans, the Senate GOP. All these Senate Republicans voted no to a bill to keep the government open, a government shutdown, and to prevent the government from defaulting. Yeah, so all the Senate Republicans basically voted for to let the government default and to let the government shut down. You can read it here, right here in black and white. Mitch McConnell's Senate Republicans, GOP, votes for the U.S. to default on its debts and for the government to shut down. Here it is in black and white, guys. Can't make this stuff up. So as of right now, we are now 2 days away from a government shutdown, and we are now possibly as little as 2 weeks away from a first ever government default. An estimate is somewhere around October 15th when the government will run out of money. But that is an estimate. That doesn't mean that it can't happen earlier than this. Okay, a government default means the government will literally run out of money. It could happen on October 10th. It could happen on October 5th. It could happen on October 20th. It could happen on October 30th. That is an estimate. Even the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, does not want to give a date because we don't know the exact date that the government will literally default. And just so everybody's clear, a government shutdown and a government default are two different things. The U.S. government has never defaulted. A default is basically like the U.S. government going bankrupt or running out of money because the U.S. government already right now spends more money than they take in year after year after year for many, many years right now. The U.S. government is going to run out of money or go default if they don't raise the debt limit ceiling, which is what this vote was on last night. And all these Senate Republicans just voted to let the U.S. default on its debt and to let the government shut down. It was a combined bill, which also had aid for the states for the hurricanes and several other different things in there. So right now we are on the path for a government shutdown and a government default if things don't drastically change here in the near future. Here is Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Senate from the Democrats. Listen to what he has to say. And he's going to talk about how Social Security payments could be at risk if we don't pass a bill to fund the government for the shutdown. Well, it's not necessarily the shutdown that funds the Social Security payments, but it's the government default. Remember, the default has never happened, okay? And you're going to hear him say how Social Security payments are at risk. Military payments could be at risk. Anything regarding the government default, anything having to do with government funding is at risk. Listen to what he has to say. This is very, very important. Remember, we have never had a government default before. We've had some government shutdowns before. Those are bad. A government default is catastrophically worse. Listen to what he has to say.
Mr. President, I want to make sure everyone understands exactly what has happened here on the Senate floor. The Republican Party has now become the party of default, the party that says America doesn't pay its debts. Our country is staring down the barrel of two totally Republican-manufactured disasters: a government shutdown and a first-ever default on the national debt. The impacts of both would gravely harm every single American in this country. Republicans would let the country default for the first time in history. A few moments ago, the Senate had an opportunity to begin solving these problems right away. Democrats did their part and voted yes. But Senate Republicans, meanwhile, voted to drive our country straight towards a government shutdown and the first default in our country's history. Let me be clear. What the Republicans in the Senate did tonight is not normal. This isn't your typical Washington fracas, and it shouldn't be treated as such. It has far more severe consequences than the typical political catfight. Republicans know the consequences of their obstruction. They know a default would likely create a recession. They know that middle-class families will suffer immensely. They've heard the same warnings that we have. And by many calculations, the Republican default will raise the deficit by more than the American Rescue Plan. And yet, Republicans still obstructed tonight. It's one of the most reckless, one of the most irresponsible votes I have seen taken place in the Senate, and it should send a signal to every family, small business, market watcher about who in this chamber is in favor of endangering the economic stability of our country and who isn't. Let me repeat, the Republican Party has solidified itself as the party of default, and it will be the American people who pay the price. Social Security checks, Medicare benefits, veterans benefits, small business, all this and more are now on the chopping block because Senate Republicans are playing games with the full faith and credit of the United States. Now, despite Republican intransigence, this matter cannot be set aside for even a moment. Before the vote, I changed my vote from yes to no in order to reserve the option of additional action on the House-passed legislation. Keeping the government open and preventing a default is vital to our country's future, and we'll be taking further action to prevent this from happening this week.
So yeah, let me know your thoughts on this down below in the comments. It's a really tough one here. Really tough one here. We're now 2 days away from a government shutdown and possibly as little as 2 weeks away from a first ever government default. Yeah. And remember, this October 15th is an estimate. Could be before then, could be after then, could be exactly on then. That's an estimate. Yeah. Seeing all sorts of headlines like this. President Joe Biden has spent his entire life preparing for this week. And this week is going to be a very big week with this government shutdown looming, this potential default looming. This default is a very, very big deal, guys. This default has never happened. We have never seen a government default ever. It's literally like the government going bankrupt. And the full faith and credit of the United States is at risk here. And it's literally telling the world that we can't pay our bills and the United States is bankrupt, out of money, basically because we can't get the Republicans and Democrats to agree. Yeah. And the American people will be the people to take the blow. Yeah. Also, I'm seeing more articles like this, how Joe Biden could end the debt ceiling all by himself, minting the trillion-dollar coin, the 14th Amendment, and other ways to end the debt ceiling. Last-ditch options to potentially have other ways to get around the debt limit ceilings if the Democrats and Republicans can't come to an agreement, and if the Democrats can't pass the reconciliation bill or the stimulus package in time to raise the debt limit ceiling. Number one is to mint a $1 trillion coin, as you can see here pictured. And yes, this is actually a real thing. Here's another headline from Business Insider. the Biden administration could sidestep McConnell's refusal to pay America's bills by minting a $1 trillion platinum coin. Apparently, this is actually a real thing. This has actually been considered by previous administrations. And Pramila Jayapal has actually considered this for stimulus checks as well. I don't believe this has ever actually been done, but this is something that has been considered by several administrations in an emergency. So this is something that could be done in an emergency. And if you think about it, I know it seems kind of a crazy idea, but if you think about it, the United States does print its own currency. They do print $100 bills. They do print, they used to print $500 bills and $1,000 bills. So if they do print $100 bills, they literally could just print a whole bunch of $100 bills, or they could just print a $1 trillion coin. Either way, it's kind of the same idea. Print a whole bunch of money and fund the government, or print a $1 trillion platinum coin and basically fund the government with that $1 trillion coin as a type of temporary reserve to fund the government temporarily while the Democrats go through this procedure to pass the stimulus package if they need to buy a little bit more time to pass the stimulus package. Remember that the reason that Mitch McConnell has all the Republicans voting no is that they just don't agree with the Democrats. Imagine that. Republicans don't agree with the Democrats. Mitch McConnell says that the Democrats should just raise the debt limit on their own because they just don't agree with everything the Democrats are doing. And the Democrats should raise the debt limit on their own, even though the Republicans and Democrats have always done it together. It's been raised 60 times in the last 80 years, the debt limit, that is. 3 times in the last 4 years underneath former President Donald Trump. So really, this is just a political game. They really could just, the Republicans could just say, yes, pass this, and we'd be all done with this political game. But Mitch McConnell refuses to do that, so we have to go through this whole rigmarole here, and the whole American economy is at risk. Can't make this stuff up. Can't make this stuff up. So instead of the Republicans just saying, okay, we'll raise the debt limit ceiling because we have to do it, we have to go through this whole dire situation. I can't make this stuff up, guys. Literally can't make this stuff up. Instead of them just saying, okay, we'll raise the debt ceiling. We know we have to do it. Mitch McConnell has literally said, we know we have to do it. We know we can't default, but we're going to make the Democrats do it. The problem is the Democrats aren't sure if they can do it in time with the whole reconciliation process, because it's exactly that. It's a process. It's not just a snap your fingers and pass the vote. And of course, we have Joe Manchin and all the Democrats, and they're trying to get the vote done. And whether or not they're going to be able to do it, well, that's another thing. So whether they can do this $1 trillion coin is another matter. Whether or not they can actually do that, whether it's a real thing or not, well, we'll see. Maybe that will come to pass also. Here's what the article says. If you were following the news during the 2011 and 2013 debt ceiling crisis, imagine that. They actually dealt with this before. You'll remember this one. Way back in 2010, Carlos Mucha, a blog writer and commenter using the name Beowulf, noticed a strange federal law giving the U.S. Treasury Secretary the power to issue platinum coins of any value she wishes. The original intention behind the law, as its author, former Representative Michael Castle, told me back in 2013, was to make it easier to produce platinum coins for the international coin collector market. It had nothing to do with the debt ceiling. But in 2011, Mucha revived the idea in the context of the debt ceiling standoff. The Federal Reserve, he noted, owns trillions of dollars in treasury bonds. The Treasury Secretary could issue, say, a platinum coin worth $2 trillion, deposit it into the Treasury's account at the Fed, and use those funds to sustain the government until the debt ceiling is raised. The best part of the mint the coin plan is that the idea of funding the government with a literal $1 or $2 trillion coin is extremely funny. The worst part is that it's extremely funny and thus seems insufficiently serious for the U.S. government. That's part of why the Obama administration rejected the idea back then. But the legal case for minting the coin is as solid as platinum. Just ask former U.S. Mint head Philip Delhey or Senator Mike Lee, a Republican from Utah, who has introduced legislation to close the platinum coin loophole. The plain text of the law clearly allows the Treasury Secretary to do this. And Jay Powell, the federal chairman in a past career, an expert of the debt ceiling and its dangers, is arguably legally required to accept the coin as a deposit. The other thing the Democrats could do is when they pass the stimulus package, they could simply raise the debt limit ceiling or get rid of the debt ceiling in its entirety so they don't have to go through this every 1 to 2 years. We've had both Democrats and Republicans saying we should just simply get rid of the debt ceiling because when they pass bills into law, like any of the stimulus packages or even the 2017 Trump tax cuts, or any bill that goes into law, first of all, it has to get voted on by Congress. Why would they have the debt ceiling in addition to it? It's almost like a double jeopardy where they pass a bill into law and then they have the debt ceiling in addition to that, where they have to pass the debt ceiling to pay for the debt again. So they have to pass a bill into law. It has to be voted on by Congress. Then they have to vote on the debt ceiling again to vote on the debts that have already been passed by Congress. And we're basically the only country in the world to do this. Now, Denmark also has a sort of debt ceiling, but between us and Denmark, we're the only countries in the entire world that even have a debt ceiling at all. And there's many Democrats and Republicans that say we shouldn't even have a debt ceiling at all because it's ridiculous to have to do this every 1 to 2 years and risk our country defaulting and seniors not getting the Social Security payments, the military not getting paid, and us looking like a fool in front of the entire country. Yeah. The other thing that comes into play is we're set to vote on the physical infrastructure package on Thursday, which is September 30th at midnight is government shutdown day if something doesn't change before then. Yeah. And we were hoping that the stimulus package would be passed before then. But if we're going to have a government shutdown that day at midnight, uh, yeah, who knows what's going to happen. And here's the other thing is that if the debt limit ceiling is not raised, I don't know if these packages can even be passed. I mean, theoretically, they could be passed if they pass before the debt limit ceiling. But if they're not passed before the debt limit ceiling showdown is done, these packages can't be passed. So they either have to pass these packages before the debt limit ceiling issue. If the government gets shut down, I don't think they can pass these packages. Let's put it that way. So we're kind of getting into theory issue here because I don't think they're going to be able to pass a package if we have a government shutdown. Let's put it that way. Yeah, and like I said, we're getting into theory here because once we start to get into government shutdowns and government defaults, we're starting to get into uncharted territories. Remember, we've never had a government default ever. And I don't think they're going to be passing any bills with the government shutdown. So come September 30th at midnight, if the government shut down, things are going to change dramatically. Now, I think they're going to try very, very hard here in the next 2 days to prevent a government shutdown. But at this point, the Republicans are not voting for a government default. And remember, the government default is the much, much worser of the two than the government shutdown. Now, government shutdown is very, very bad. It's going to put hundreds of thousands of people out of work. Anybody that works in the government sector that is not a government essential employee is going to be out of a job temporarily. We're going to see all sorts of branches from the government close down. We're going to see, yeah, I mean, we've seen government shutdowns in the past. They're bad. They can last anywhere from a few days to a few months. But a default is where things get really, really bad. That's basically the government running out of money, saying to the world that the US government has no money, they've gone bankrupt, they've gone default. And that is where you've seen Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer saying Social Security payments might not go out, payments to the military might not go out, payments to school systems might not go out, Medicare, Medicaid might be at risk. And we say might because the U.S. government's never defaulted. So we don't even really gonna know what's gonna happen because it's all in theory. It's all in theory because what's gonna happen? Well, it's never happened before. So it's really hard to say what will happen when something has never happened before. You know what I'm saying? So what's going to happen is the government has money coming in. So, people are paying their taxes, people are paying quarterly taxes. The government has revenue coming in. But the problem is that the government runs a deficit. And we've been running a deficit for many, many years, whether it's a Republican president, a Democratic president. Former President Trump added $8 trillion to the deficit in 4 years. Biden's running a deficit. I mean, even on day one of Biden's presidency, the minute he walked in the door, before he was even president, basically, the government was running a deficit. So before he even really did anything, just the first breath of him being a president, the government was already running a deficit. So before you can even blame him, if you're a Republican, deficit. Same thing with Trump. The first second he walked in, the government was already a deficit. Same thing for Obama. The first second he walked in, deficit. So again, it's just the government's been running a deficit for many, 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 many years, right? It's a habitual problem that's been snowballing for many, many, many years. So blame whoever you want, right? There's many, many people to blame, right? It's a huge, huge, massive problem. But we can't let the government default. And then we have to pass these packages, stimulus package, infrastructure package, and get back to normal here. So let me know your thoughts. I'll keep you up to date. Let's have our fingers crossed and say our prayers here. But the Republicans and Democrats they gotta figure something out. They gotta they gotta start communicating and quit acting like crybabies. They gotta act like adults here and do their jobs because it's getting bad, and we're on a course to nowhere good. So I'll keep you up to date. We'll get through this together here on the show. New videos come out here every day at 10 a.m., 3 p.m., and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure to subscribe down below if you haven't yet. It's completely free to do so. You can click this video here to watch my newest stimulus check video next. And this video is how they're trying to add $1,400 stimulus checks into this next stimulus package. So click on one of those videos next. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.